A very hearty good morning to one and all present here. The program will begin soon. We ask that all attendees keep their microphones muted and cameras turned off.
Okay, and Seema Peter. Since our guest is here, I think we can begin. Ashutosh ji.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am. Sure, we can go ahead with it now.
Certainly, ma'am.
Certainly, ma'am.
A very warm welcome to all the dignitaries present here. I, Anushri Mohanty,
And I, Seema Chaudhary,
would like to extend a warm welcome to one and all present here today for day 2 of the Shastri Indo-Canadian virtual lecture series. I would like to request our beloved director of Symbiosis Center for Management Studies, Pune, Dr. Adya Sharma, to kindly address the gathering.
Thank you, Beta. Dr. Bruce, are you here? Ashutosh ji, Dr. Bruce is with us.
Yes, yes, ma'am. He is there. Yeah, there.
So good to see
Yes,
you.
I am.
Sir. Yes, sir. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
And a very warm welcome to SCMS Pune and Shastri Indo-Canadian lecture series.
Well,
Dr.
thank you very much.
Bruce, we are truly honored to have you with us over here today. And this is especially special for us. This is especially special for us because while we are comfortably sitting here at around 10 a.m. in the morning, you are joining us live from Canada, where maybe this is already midnight, going to be midnight or past midnight. This means so much to us, and we are so grateful to you. So, welcome to India.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Sharma and other faculty and students. I'm delighted to be here.
Sir, I'll just take, I know all my students are waiting to listen to you, but please allow me 2 minutes. I cannot let go of this opportunity to introduce our university and our institute to such an esteemed dignitary like you. A very warm welcome to all my faculty, staff, the other guests, and of course, an extra special welcome to all the students. So as you just saw the film, Symbiosis was established in the year 1971 on the motto Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, which means the world is one family. Today, it's a destination of more than 45,000 students from across the world. And sir, I speak with pride when I tell you that just the last Sunday, our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, was there with us to celebrate the Golden Jubilee celebration of Symbiosis. Sir, Symbiosis Center for Management Studies, or SCMS Pune, our institute, offers a BBA degree to the students. It's one of the leading BBA institutes in our country. And sir, our only aim is that the students who are as young as 17 and 18 when they join us, when they pass out after 3 years, then they have the confidence to take decisions based on knowledge. And for that, we provide them various platforms. That platform may be an academic platform, which is heavily multidisciplinary. That platform may be working with the NGOs to understand the community. So that platform may be to interact and learn from dignitaries like you, to get that, to learn from your experiences. So that platform can be working with cohorts of students from other parts of the world, and the list goes on. We just want them to be confident. We want them to take decisions which are based on knowledge. And sir, as I said, I'm really grateful once again to you for being here with us. Your presence has made this series extra special. Thank you so much, and welcome once again to India. Namaste.
Namaskar.
thank you so much, ma'am, for inaugurating today's session. When the unforeseen pandemic named COVID-19 first hit us back in 2020, we hadn't anticipated the immense impact it would leave across industries. Within months, however, the world realized the same as a few industries came to a crippling standstill. Industries such as tourism, hotels, schools, colleges, and sports found themselves the most affected since they operated primarily offline. However, they also soon adapted themselves to the new scenario as the managerial aspect of all these has completely moved online. To help us understand more about the same, we have with us today Dr. Bruce Kidd, a Canadian academician, author, and athlete. He won 18 national senior championships in Canada, the United States, and Britain. He won a gold and a bronze medal at the 1962 British Empire and Commonwealth Games and was a member of the Canadian 1964 Summer Olympics team. On February 27, 2014, Dr. Bruce was named to become the interim vice president and principal for University of Toronto Scarborough. Subsequently, in December 2014, he was appointed as the 10th principal of the university. He is an honorary member of the Canadian Olympic Committee and volunteer chair of the Selection Committee, Canada Sports Hall of Fame. In 2018, he was inducted into the Scarborough Walk of Fame. Sir, today we'll be speaking on the topic, sports leadership after COVID-19. It is truly an honor, sir, to have you here with us today. We welcome you. The stage is all yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chowdhury and Dr. Sharma and other faculty members. If I can just take a second to get that there, I will begin. Good morning, everyone. It's a great honor for me to participate in this series and to contribute to this Indo-Canadian exchange. Such exchanges have enriched my entire intellectual and cultural life. In the 1960s, I taught at the University of Rajasthan in Jaipur and traveled the country to study the development of Indian sport, an experience that changed me forever. Since then, I've returned many times to India to conduct research and teach, and have collaborated on conferences and publications with Indian scholars such as Dr. Borya Majumdar, the cricket and Olympic historian who spoke yesterday, and Dr. Payoshni Mitra, who led the successful legal defense of Duti Chand against her unfair suspension by World Athletics. I regret that I cannot be in Pune today to learn firsthand from you, but I hope that sometime I will be able to visit the Symbiosis Center for Management Studies and hear about your ambitions and activities. Congratulations on your 50th anniversary. It's a remarkable achievement. The theme of this conference is sustainable strategies for dealing with uncertainty. These are frighteningly uncertain times. Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine has plunged the world into a crisis not seen for many decades. It has already sent more than 2 million refugees into Western Europe. Despite the overwhelming military Russian superiority, the determined Ukrainian defense, and the worldwide economic sanctions, the outcome is still very unclear. In sports, the world's traditional commitment to open, peaceful athletic competitions between representatives of all nations as a strategy of international intercultural respect has been abruptly abandoned. A growing number of sports bodies has suspended competition with Russia and Belarus under pressure from athletes and the public. We saw this most dramatically last week in Beijing, where the International Paralympic Committee first decided to welcome Russian and Belarus delegations to the Winter Paralympic Games, and then just 12 hours later, reversed that decision and sent them home. These issues and the uncertainties they create is all the people I know in sports are talking about these days. It's impossible to know how it will turn out. For most of the last 2 years, most of us have been preoccupied by other difficult crises, including global warming, the rise in xenophobia, and COVID-19. The pandemic has killed more than 6 million people, endangered the health of millions more, undermined economies, and completely disrupted everyday life. In many parts of the world, like my own, the virus still constitutes a deadly threat. The pandemic has had a hugely negative effect upon sports. It continues to pose new and unprecedented challenges for sports leaders. This will be my topic today. I will provide an overview of sport under COVID, drawing primarily upon my experience in Canada and the work I did for the Commonwealth Secretariat in assessing the effect of COVID-19 upon community sport across the Commonwealth. While governments commit to building sport back better, it won't be easy. It will require significant new investments, no easy task at a time when government budgets have already been stretched by COVID relief payments and inflation is rampant. It will also require new skills for a much more socially aware, well-educated generation of sports leaders. I will therefore briefly outline the tremendous benefits to societies from sports, make recommendations for governments and the sports industry, and suggest the new knowledges and skills emerging sports leaders, such as the students here today, should have. I will try to leave time for questions and discussions at the end. So these, you can see the topics that I will cover. In many ways, sports provided rare good news stories during the pandemic, moments of inspiring human achievement and international goodwill to cheer us up. You've no doubt examples from Indian sport, especially the dramatic performances of Indian cricketers in the Indian Premier League and the ICC Tests and Championships. At the Olympics and Paralympics in Tokyo, and at the Winter Olympics and Paralympics in Beijing, despite a worrying rise in infections, the absence of spectators, the restrictions upon intercultural mingling, and so many other challenges, these games demonstrated for the entire world to see the joyous value of international sports. It was clear from the faces of the athletes and coaches in the ceremonies and the competitions, they wanted to be there, and they wanted to be there with each other. There were so many electrifying performances, so many heartfelt demonstrations of respect and friendship among athletes from different countries. In Tokyo, 93 of the 205 participating National Olympic Committees came away with medals, the broadest representation on the podium in Olympics history. And I was delighted to see that India won more Olympic medals than ever before. Once again, a refugee Olympic team with 29 athlete refugees from 11 countries living and training in 13 host countries competed with distinction, giving other hope and inspiration to the world. Sports help people address the risks and challenges of COVID-19 in other important ways as well. For those who could be physically active, they enabled participants to strengthen their resilience and physical and mental health. In cities across the globe, governments closed streets to enable more play and opened new bike lanes for physically distanced walking, running, and cycling. Sports organizations broadcast and supported public health guidelines, worked with public health experts to develop safe return to play guidelines, created online programming to those in restricted environments, distributed meals to schools for children who would otherwise go hungry, and made facilities available for emergency hospitals, testing and vaccinations, shelters, food banks, and voting stations. In many countries, professional athletes contributed to the salaries of minimum wage workers who were laid off. But the overall picture is not encouraging. Whether it's first world countries like my own or impoverished states in the global south, already dangerously low participation rates have fallen even further. While the media have reported on every challenge faced by corporate sports, they have been largely silent about the impact upon school and community sports and sport for development. In those sectors, closed facilities, plummeting revenues, staff layoffs, and social distancing requirements have sharply reduced, even eliminated, physical education and sport and many forms of adult fitness. In Canada, in one report issued by the Jump Start Foundation, the researchers found that 3 in 10 Canadian sports organizations were temporarily or permanently closed. 6 in 10 struggled to provide modified online programming, and 1/3 became bankrupt and went out of business. 69% of surveyed parents said that their children were already showing signs of being less physically fit than before the pandemic. And we must remember that in Canada, organized sport is largely a middle class and upper class practice where pay for play requirements exclude the poor. Those who have already been disproportionately inactive, girls and women, the poor, and persons with disabilities have suffered the most. And by the way, this illustration on the right of this slide comes from one of those reports listing the effects of pandemic on girls and women in sport. As it has in other areas of society, notably health and healthcare, the pandemic has exposed widespread and harmful inequalities, with the resulting loss of resilience, mental health, and self-mastery to which they contribute. The NGO Canadian Women in Sport, and that's from this slide here, found that the closures and cancellations necessitated by the pandemic have discouraged 1 in 4 girls from further participation. During a crisis of worldwide contagion, it's easy to forget that the world's most serious health challenge is not COVID, but non-communicable diseases like diabetes, coronary health conditions, stroke, hypertension, and several forms of cancer. According to the World Health Organization, NCDs kill more than 41 million people a year, way more than COVID killed in 2 years. And NCDs kill more than 71% of all deaths annually. It is estimated that sport and physical activity could reduce that risk by 20 to 30% if it was fully extended and avert up to 5 million deaths a year. During the last year, the success of bubble-protected professional sports in my country and yours, and the continued business-as-usual mass media coverage of sport distorted the extent of this crisis. Few of the government relief payments went to sport. If our societies are to build sport back better and extend these benefits to all, governments and the sports industry must take much more responsibility for restoring and extending opportunity. So why invest in sport? It's impossible adequately to explain the significance of sport and physical activity to individuals their families and communities in a short presentation like this. But there's virtually no aspect of modern societies, from the economic and political spheres, communications, transportation, urban design and schooling, to health and well-being, that's not affected in some way by sports. So let me focus on the benefits of participation to societies and individuals and think about what is needed to move beyond the crisis. For communities, sports can provide an important source of economic stimulus and employment. In my country, studies report that sports generates more than 2% of consumer spending, slightly less than that, 1.8% of gross domestic product, and 2% of all of the jobs. And those numbers are slowly growing year by year. That's more than other traditional sectors that have defined the Canadian economy, such as forestry and mining. For individuals, especially children and youth, sports can provide enriching opportunities for healthy growth and development and learning about self and society. The research shows that regular participation enhances physical health. It may positively affect self-esteem, self-worth, social responsibility, and empathy, especially of girls and women. And I saw some lovely photographs in the historical account of your university of both young men and young women in sport. And I'm sure their academic performances are better as a result of their participation. It can enhance school retention, academic achievement, and community safety. It may also decrease the likelihood of destructive and unsafe practices, including youth crime, drug use, and unsafe sex. Sport has been shown to reach many young people who are not attracted by other networks or other interventions, especially those hard to reach, build intergenerational networks, and as I've indicated, give girls and women opportunities to challenge traditional and oppressive gender relations. But these benefits are not automatic. It's not just add sport and all of these benefits will occur. They've got to be accessible, they've got to be of a high quality, they've got to be safe, and the participants have got to see them in themselves. Some sports leaders tell me, mostly professional sports leaders, that they already contribute to spreading sport through the inspiring performances of the professional athletes they produce. But from my own research, inspiration is not enough. My colleague Peter Donnelly and I studied the national sports organizations in Canada that produced Olympic medalists during the last 30 years. We studied every national sports organization whose athletes had medaled over that period of time. And we found that while Canadian performances, as you see on this graph, are steadily increasing, Canadian overall participation in sport is steadily declining. The curves are going in the wrong way. We interviewed people who watch sport about the extent of their inspiration. And certainly exciting performances inspire. But if the children and youth and adults who are inspired by sport do not have real accessible opportunities, or they can't afford them, such inspiration quickly evaporates, or it can turn to bitterness. Today in my country, pay for play is beyond the reach of the majority of the population after school. So as I began to say a moment ago, sport is a necessary but not sufficient condition for these social benefits. Participants must feel it's their program and have genuine access, including the equipment they need and the transportation that will get them to the venues. They must feel safe, valued, socially connected, and supported. Too many times across the world, there are stories of athletes abused in sport. That does not make anyone feel safe. Leadership is key. As a longtime teacher and an educator, if I had only one quality, I had only had one input to bring to improve sport, it would be trained leadership, committed administrators, coaches, and volunteers. Facilities are important. Financial support is important, but if you don't have good leadership, you're really stuck. Leadership that know what they're doing and also follow a high ethical standard. We know that the best sport programs are not standalone, but are linked to education and employment. And as the title for this conference suggests, good programs must be sustained to have lasting impact. You can't have a world-class program if it only goes 4 months, or it only goes 6 months, and then the organizers take off and they're never seen again. That just leaves disappointment and bitterness behind. It's instructive to see that the United Nations now regards sport as an important contributor to what are called the Sustainable Development Goals. The UN established the SDGs, as you probably well know, in 2015 to provide a blueprint for more equitable, sustainable world. While there has been debate about the specifics and the means of implementation, there is widespread consensus that the SDGs constitute a worthwhile framework for public policy and investment. The UN singles out sport and physical activity as contributors to these specific goals. And the UN Secretary General has given sport for development a ringing endorsement for all these reasons you can see in that slide. The UN is a huge advocate for the message that I bring you today. In the Commonwealth, where I've served on the Commonwealth Advisory Body on Sport and had a term as chair, and where I've studied and contributed to community sport, in the depths of COVID, the Commonwealth sports ministers met online, virtually, and they made these recommendations: that we have a safe return to both spectator sport and sport for all, not just spectator sport, but all forms of sport, that societies develop stronger links between sport and population health, to address the non-communicable diseases that are so virulent in our society, and that governments develop more robust, internationally coordinated monitoring and evaluation of sport, education, and health outcomes, because as the slide said, now I'm missing my notes here, as the slide said, evidence motivates action. At the moment on that third bullet, nobody in the world is doing a very effective job. Several years ago, Dr. Majumdar and I, Dr. Boyer Majumdar, I realize there are several famous Dr. Majumdars in your community. Boria and I did a study on Indian participation in sport. And we sought to look at the extent of participation and the demographic breakdown, males and females, persons with disability, and so on. We found that only about half the Indian states collected the necessary data. And what was most frustrating, no two states used the same metrics. How can you compare, use data to spur improvement, to spur exchange and collaboration if you're all counting the same thing? And it's the same thing in my country too. We need way better data. And I think that students of your generation know about the need for careful monitoring and assessment, for good policy, for good business. The sports ministers also recommended more public-private partnerships, recognizing that not only government, but corporations and non-governmental organizations are all needed to contribute to the solution. And we need better governance, the respect for human rights and integrity, and zero tolerance for violence, harassment, abuse, and discrimination. We need to step up our campaigns against racism, homophobia, and other hatreds. I understand that some of the students in your university are thinking about careers in sports management. I may have got that. Dr. Sharma is nodding, so I take that. Well, this part of my talk is directed to those. You're no doubt developing expertise in strategic planning, finance, accounting, social media, communications, and so on. And all those are vital to successful careers. But I will argue today that if sport as a whole sphere of society, sector of society, is going to be successful and produce the benefits that I've mentioned, you also have to demonstrate a commitment to sport for all and the skills to enable that to happen. You need, if you don't already have this, a comprehensive awareness of the entire landscape for sport, including community sport, sport for development, and the challenges. And think not only about how you can market your part of the industry to those people with the ability to pay, but to extend opportunities for those who can't, so that the entire sports sector can be stronger. Given the need to overcome discrimination, to realize gender equality, and so on, you need social inclusion awareness, and the skills of social awareness need to be combined with the skills of social outreach, the skills of community development. There's a famous study from Sydney, Australia, where the sports industry providers were invited to comment on the interests of women from minority, religious, ethnocultural, linguistic backgrounds. And 75% of those providers said such women are not interested in sport or physical activity. Their culture puts them down. They're preoccupied with childcare and looking after these extended families. It's not something that they're interested in. Then the research went out and interviewed a sample of the same number of women from those communities. And it's amazing, the same number, 75% said, of course we want these opportunities. Of course we want these opportunities, but nobody asked us and nobody helped us find them that are appropriate to ourselves. Nobody scheduled things according to the times when we could go. Nobody thought about providing childcare. Nobody thought about the transportation, and nobody thought about making them culturally appropriate to us. And I can multiply findings like that around the world. And it requires the next generation of sports leaders to be much more aware of how to reach out and bring in those who are not already there, instead of just bringing in people who are like ourselves. I think the challenge for your generation is forging better links with public health to safeguard sport, because the pandemic's going to stick around a while longer, to campaign for sport as not simply inspiration, but as population health. Continue the public space innovations that have happened. And I'm sorry, I don't know enough about what's happened in India in the last 2 years, but I'm sure there have been some of these as well. Insist on gender equity, continue to combat racism, eradicate maltreatment and gender-based violence, and strengthen monitoring and evaluation. In addition to your finance skills and your IT wizardry and all of that, for which I'm sure you are the best trained of anyone around, you've got to develop these other skills if you're going to help us build sport back better. So I'm coming to an end. This is a message to 3 big players in the world of sport today. First, governments. And governments must strengthen their investments in sport for all as investments in population health. And some of that money has got to come from the health budget, and some of that money has got to come from other sources. Once upon a time in my province in Canada, there was a tax on professional sport to enable better school sport. I'm not sure whether that's appropriate today, but that's the kind of new thinking or revised thinking we need to see. The sports industry must invest more in community sport as part of doing business, as a cost of doing business. And the next generation of sports leaders must learn the skills, learn and practice the skills of community development. Well, thank you very much for your attention. I'm very pleased to be part of this conference. I'm pleased that I stayed up this late. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your wonderful pearls of wisdom. It gave us a new perspective on the changing landscape of sports in India and Canada, sustainability in sports, and the value of excellent leadership in leading a team through difficult times. Sir, with your permission, we would now like to ask you some questions which you have received from the audience.
Before that, please allow me to welcome Ashokji. Ashokji, thank you so much for joining today also. I mean, we are really grateful to you for helping us at every step, including your presence today. Thank you so much.
It's good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My pleasure always.
Good morning, sir. Dr. Bruce, maybe ask you a few questions that we have received from the audience.
Okay, I'm looking. I see I don't see any questions in the chat.
So we have received those questions personally, sir.
Are people going to just give me the questions?
Yes, sir. So we have them for you.
Okay, fire away.
Yes, sir. So the first question that we have for you is, you have been a member of the Summer Olympics team and have won various other accolades. What was that thing that kept you driven through all those endeavors?
You know, I love sport. I found that it was good for me. I found that as I became more focused on training, It taught me time management in a way that enabled me to excel in my academic life as well. It gave me a sense of purpose. So, and it gave me great pleasure. I met some other wonderful people through sport and enabled me to travel and see the world. But what kept me going? I've written, I'm not sure whether you're aware of it, but I just finished a memoir where I talked about my life in sport, and there were two themes that led me to, I never thought I would still be talking about sport at this point in my life. I thought I would retire from sport and become a lawyer or go into public life, and that would be it. But I kept on being drawn back into sport because of the pleasure it gave me, but the importance I saw in the lives of other people. And I saw that while I was a privileged middle-class male in Canadian society, that were many people who would have wanted to do sport could not because of sexism or racism, and they needed someone to speak up for them. And I had a teammate, another Olympian, Harry Jerome, Olympic bronze medalist in Tokyo, who would tell me these horrible stories about how he was treated. And I don't know where I got the courage. I was a little kid then, I was your age, but I gradually started speaking out on his behalf and for another teammate who was a woman. You know, in the 50s and 60s, when we were running, women's sport was very marginal in Canada. Well, it was marginal in Rajasthan, which I taught there too. And while boys had dressing rooms and hot showers after workouts, women changed behind trees. And my women teammates would point to that and say, that's so unfair. What are you going to do about it? And those two teammates spurred me to take advantage of my privilege and also my celebrity, because it's hard to believe in the 1960s, I was a famous athlete. I was Canada's Athlete of the Year twice. And it still happens. Sports writers came around to my workouts and asked me what I thought about everything. So I gradually it took me a while, I gradually got used to telling them, well, why don't you write about the racism in sport? Or why don't you write, so it was a slow process like that. And I'm still doing it, as you heard.
Thank you so much for that answer, sir. What you've achieved so far is something to really look up to. The next question that we have for you is, after COVID, people and students in specific don't know how to cope up with the ups and downs in life. What would you like to tell them from your experience in sports?
You know, if you may have to slow down, but you can always keep going. If you fall, you can always pick yourself up again. You go again. And if the first step is always the hardest, but the second step is a little bit easier, and so on and so forth. And if you do physical activity every day, it will give you the resilience to pick yourself up again. You don't have to play a sport. You don't have to be a hockey star or a cricketer or a track and field star or a shooter. So many amazing Indian shooters these days. But be physically active. And there's a great tradition of physical activity in India. But when you're a student and you've got, I don't want to, you've got a lot of assignments and you've got a lot of stress about exams and so on. And sometimes you think that you should just close the door and work on your studying. My advice would be, no matter what, every day, get outside and do a little bit of physical activity. and every day make sure you drink water, you have some healthy food to eat, and you get as much sleep as you can, and you'll be the stress will be a lot easier to deal with. I'm not saying there won't be stress, but the stress will be easier to deal with.
Absolutely, sir. In fact, your answer reminded me of a very old saying, health is wealth.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your insights. So we have so many more questions, but I think we have the time to take one last question from the audience, which I would like to present to you, sir. So the audience is asking that what is something that is common between being an academician, author, and an athlete? And how did you incorporate skills learned in all the respective professions into one another?
I mean, maybe it's late at night and I don't have a 1, 2, 3, 4 quick answer. First of all, I would say time management and focus. Both sport and academics require that you use your time productively, that you don't waste your time, and that you develop goals, and you develop mid-range goals, and you pursue them. You may be driven aside for a while, but keep those end goals in mind and persevere. If you fall, get up again. You can, if you slow down, if you slow down and you're not making the intermediate times that you hoped, that's discouraging, but don't stop. Keep going, and you'll, to use a sporting metaphor, you may recover a second wind. I would say 2 other things about sport that resonate with me in academics. Sport is about people, and it's about learning from people. And whether it's in a training with your teammates and your club and your school, or whether it's with other people, if you can reach out to them, even after you're competing with them, you can learn from them. I've always thought that that sport is a brilliant improvisation, and that we're not competitors to the death. We're co-players who push each other to do better. And and boy, oh boy, I'm amazed I've remembered this. But I've used that image a lot, and I picked that up in India when I went to a concert in Jaipur, and there was a drummer and a dancer, and I've never forgotten that. The drummer would play out a rhythm, and then the dancer would repeat the rhythm, and then up the ante by dancing an even more difficult rhythm. And then the drummer would do the dancer's rhythm, and then up the ante and play another rhythm, and back and forth. And it started off slowly, but in about 25 minutes, and the place was in frenzy. And it was one of the most brilliant performances of people going to the absolute limit that I've ever seen. And they spurred each other on. And a race, the best races I ever had were when I was racing against somebody else, and we pushed each other. And we became so engrossed that we pushed each other. And following hockey, your hockey, and following other sports, the best athletes push each other. The best athletes push each other. And academics is like that too. If you have a curiosity about a subject, whether it's math or biochemistry or history or languages, if you reach out or you bump into or gravitate to people of like-minded interest, you learn from each other and you push each other. you're both friends and rivals. I mean, it happens. It happens in good schools, I'm sure, Dr. Sharma, where you've got this kind of, and you push each other. So I think that is another very powerful parallel between competitive sport and competitive academics. The best, the rapid cure, the vaccines that we've discovered, the world has discovered to a deal, came from different people pushing ideas and both sharing those ideas and competing with each other around the world. Anyway, I'm rambling on. I'm sorry to do that, but I hope that's part of an answer to your question.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for answering all the questions so patiently and giving us such practical insights. So here at Symbiosis, we firmly believe in our motto, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which is Sanskrit for the world is one family. And sir, your kind presence with us today has echoed the same feeling. We are so honored to have received such valuable lessons from you on sports leadership. Thank you so much, sir. I would now like to call upon Dr. Shreya Virani, faculty at Symbiosis Center for Management Studies, Pune, to kindly give the vote of thanks for our esteemed guest of honor, Dr. Bruce Kidd.
Thank you, Anushri. Good morning, everyone. I, on behalf of our director and my institute, SCMS Pune, take this opportunity to offer our sincere gratitude to today's guest of honor, Dr. Bruce Kidd, for delivering such an enriching session despite being late hour in Canada. Thank you so much, sir. Our thanks to Mr. Ashok Nambudri, sir, for joining this session and being with us. Thank you.